The Kenny Payne era for Louisville basketball officially tips off tonight as the Cardinals open up the season against the Bellarmine Knights. On today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast, we're going to talk about why the Knights are a solid and dangerous test for Kenny Payne's team on Wednesday and more. With that being said, let's get right on into the show.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome in to another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This episode is brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup between the Louisville Cardinals and the Clemson Tigers right here on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for a price you'll love. Try it today. As always, I want to say thank you for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. We're going to open up the show by discussing why the Bellarmine Knights are a solid and dangerous opponent for the Cardinals' first game in the Kenny Payne era. We'll then transition over into football, where we'll talk about what's at stake for the Cardinals against the Clemson Tigers this weekend. And then finally, we will discuss the key players to watch for the Cardinals against the Bellarmine Knights. So going from basketball to football, back to basketball. So we'll start out with the basketball portion of the show, or half of the portion, I should say. The Cardinals opening up the regular season this evening, taking on Bellarmine, 9 p.m. tip-off at the KFC Yum Center. The Bellarmine Knights coming off of a win, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase, a ASUN tournament championship, which unfortunately due to the transition from D2 to D1 and the prevention of participating in the postseason, which is really a rule that should be changed, but nonetheless, Bellarmine should have been in the big dance last year, but they won their conference tournament, which is big. They do replace a good amount of production from last season. 3 of their 5 starters are gone, 57% of their total offense. But if one thing remains true every season is that you can expect Scotty Davenport's teams to do a couple things. Number one, they do a great job of passing and moving without the basketball. Now, that is something that I could definitely foresee being a challenge for the Louisville Cardinals in Game 1 because let's face it, the exhibition matches, the pair of exhibition matches for Louisville didn't necessarily alleviate any concerns. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth on those here in just a second, but case in point, it didn't really alleviate any concerns, and I think that a motion offense that focuses on moving the basketball around and getting good shots, that's going to be something that's going to require Louisville to be very disciplined on the defensive end of the court. I think that the Cardinals have a lot of talent on this team, and they should be able to defend Bellarmine. I think that there will be mismatches on both ends of the court for Louisville, but it's going to be a matter of them taking advantage of that. And Bellarmine is a team that plays super hard. They play super smart. They do a good job of shooting the ball from the perimeter. A good three-point shooting team historically, seemingly year in, year out. What they lack in size, they make up for with good decision making, especially in the half court on offense. Just moving the ball around, moving without the ball, screens, pick and rolls. It's all a seemingly a very meticulous game plan for Scotty Davenport. And what I mean by that is there's such an attention to the fine details of the half-court offense and just the small, points of the game. So I think that Bellarmine is a tough matchup for Louisville because, number one, this is a team that has shown that, hey, despite not being a Power 5 team, despite maybe not returning a lot of their production from last season, they have a solid coach who has shown that Bellarmine has been able to compete right away in Division One, despite not necessarily having a ton of recruiting hype, considering the fact that it's hard to recruit with the lack of a postseason opportunity. But Bellarmine is making the most of it. They play hard. This is going to be a game to where I think it is going to epitomize everything that you're looking for. Sorry, that fly from yesterday is back. I don't know what's going on, but this fly must really, really enjoy, getting in on the recordings of these podcast episodes. But nonetheless, like I said, this game against Bellarmine, despite Louisville being a double-digit favorite, and I'm not saying that Louisville cannot handle business and win this game by double digits, because I think they definitely have the talent to do so, and that's not suggesting that this team isn't good enough to beat Bellarmine or that I'm disrespecting them. But I think that it's very, justifiable and appropriate to talk about this being a tough game, considering how Louisville handled the exhibition. They lost to a Division II school by 10. They failed to score over 50 points, and then they beat Chaminade by about 7 points, a team that Ohio State and Cincinnati both beat by over 40-plus points. Now, granted, it's not supposed to have everything figured out right away. I'm not saying that the Kenny Payne era is not going to be a successful one. I can't believe I have to get on here and say that just because I think that there is some concern for this Bellarmine game doesn't necessarily reflect my thoughts on the Kenny Payne era as a whole. I mean, I think it's going to be a very, very good era for the University of Louisville and its basketball program, but it's going to take some time. And I think those exhibition games just kind of highlighted the fact that, hey, look, year one could be a little bumpy as this team tries to figure out its identity on both ends of the court, get used to playing with each other, increasing chemistry, so on and so forth. There's a lot of development that needs to be had for some of these players on the team as well that, made up a team that was very, very rough last season. So, what was it, 11 and 14 or 14 and 17? One of the two. I think it was 14 and 17. I forget what they were or their final ranking was, but hey, very valid concerns. So I think that despite the exhibition maybe not necessarily reflecting how good this team can be, we're not talking about how good this team can be. We're talking about how good this team is right now on November 9th. It could be a different story in March. But as of right now, this game is an interesting game. It is a solid measuring stick to see exactly where the team is. Now, we'll see, okay, what's the rotation going to look like? Are we going to see a little bit more cohesiveness on offense? Will there be more discipline on defense? Did the two kind of sloppy outcomes against two inferior opponents in the exhibition, did that inspire the team? How is the team going to respond to that? Are they going to come out and play in a very I guess you could say connected manner, a very cohesive manner on both ends of the court? What's Louisville going to look like? But needless to say, I think that they're going to have to play a pretty solid game here. I think that they're going to have to be disciplined on defense. They're going to have to get out and use the transition offense. But in the half court, you're going to have to use that size. Guys like Sidney Curry, JJ Traynor, Jae'Lyn Withers, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, they're going to have to utilize the size mismatches. You're going to have to get good guard play from not only Ellis, but some of the other unproven guys like Mike James, Fabio Basili, Kamari Lands, so on and so forth. That's where a lot of people were kind of concerned about, okay, well, what about the guard play? Regardless, it's going to be a very interesting matchup, a solid test for Kenny Payne's team in year one. So I do want to transition over into football before we get back to basketball. We'll talk about what is at stake for the Louisville Cardinals against the Clemson Tigers on Saturday after we talk about our friends over at SimpliSafe. If you thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Louisville listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you wouldn't want to miss it. Here's why I love it. It has allowed me to demonstrate that safety in my own home, where my family comes first, whether that's helping avert a break-in, the effectiveness of the technology itself, or just feeling extra supported by the team. It is a 24/7 monitoring system that has an agent on standby. The tech support staff is extremely helpful. I mean, it was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, a third year in a row. And in an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use fast protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real, so you can get priority police response ASAP. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new SimpliSafe system at simplisafe.com/URL today. I'm sorry, /LockedOnCollege today. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts' insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So moving right on along into the football segment of the show, the Louisville Cardinals on the road for the first time since that 34-17 victory over Virginia. This time they will travel to Clemson and take on the 10th-ranked Tigers. The Tigers are coming off of their first loss in the 2022 campaign, a 35-14 defeat up in South Bend against Notre Dame. Clemson 8-1. They are favored in this game by, I believe, it is currently at 7. Could be more, could be a little less. The ESPN Football Power Index and Analytics has Clemson as a 76.2% chance to winning this game. So what's at stake? Well, this is kind of an argument to where it's like, okay, it's not like previous weeks where there's not a lot to gain but a lot to lose. This time around, with the work that you've put in over the past 4 weeks, there's a lot to gain, but fairly limited amount of loss that is present. Because let's face it, if you lose this game, it's at number 10 Clemson. It's in Death Valley. It's a place that I don't think many road teams have had much success against in the past decade. I forget what their home win streak is, but it's incredible. So Clemson's very good at home. They're coming off of a loss, so Dabo Swinney's team is going to be very, very energized. They're going to look to prove a point, get back into the hunt for the college football playoff. They were, I think, 10th in the rankings that came out yesterday. So you would assume Clemson winning out a one-loss ACC winner would probably be good enough to get into the college football playoff, but they're still not going to try to take any chances. So Louisville's going to get the Tigers' best, the best performance here, in my opinion, or at least the best effort. So at the end of the day, this is a matchup that I think a 7-point Vegas line, I think it's very, very interesting because if Louisville is able to only lose this game by 7, I think that's one of those where you look at, and I'm not a big moral victory guy, but you look at it and there's probably going to be some positives to take away from that victory. Because, Clemson hasn't been the Clemson of years past. They do have a quarterback issue. DJ Uiagalelei hasn't necessarily been, extremely reliable. I know he's had a solid start to the season, but had some rough outings the past couple of weeks. Cade Klubnik, the true freshman quarterback, is just that, a true freshman quarterback. Now, Klubnik is fantastic. I think he's extremely talented, but it's going to take some time to get acclimated to Division I Power 5 football. You look at what Clemson's done this season. They beat Wake Forest by 6. They beat NC State by 10. Now, granted, that's when the Wolfpack had Devin Leary. They only beat Florida State by 6, only beat Syracuse by 6, and then lost to Notre Dame. So this isn't a game that's impossible to win for Louisville, but I do think it's improbable because Clemson is very solid, even though, they have some injury issues where Bo Collins, their number one receiver, will not play. Defensive lineman Xavier Thomas is out for the rest of the season, so that's 2 big contributors right there. We wish speedy recoveries too. But there's a lot to gain from a victory for Louisville. First of all, what's at stake? If you were to win this game, the instant benefits are off the charts. Number one, recruiting publicity. That would do wonders for recruiting. You've won 5 in a row. You beat a top 10 team on the road. It's another ranked victory for Louisville, and it's a team that you have not beaten since joining the ACC. You continue that momentum for the rest of the season, or continuing into the remainder of the season. Having 7 wins, being 7-3. Louisville could then lose the next 2 games. I don't think it would matter. I think that Scott Satterfield, if he were to get a win against If he were to get a win against Clemson, there is no more hot seat. We're not talking about a hot seat anymore. We're talking about a possible extension. We're probably talking about an extension if he were to go into Clemson and get the victory. We still might be talking about an extension by the end of the season, but it all depends on what transpires and what happens on the field. But you have that potential to increase the momentum in recruiting, increase the momentum on the field to where the team is still being confident, and that's a huge confidence booster. That would be one of the most important wins in program history, in my opinion, beating a top 10 team on the road, especially a team like Clemson, who has had your number each and every year, despite how good you are and despite how much of a down year it may be. See last year. Look, I think that there's a lot to gain. That shouldn't necessarily be much of a surprise. You probably obviously get into the top 25 if you end up winning that game, but this could secure and almost be like the cherry on top for the season. Now, granted, you have 2 more games after this, but a loss doesn't necessarily hurt you much because you're supposed to lose this game when it comes to being an underdog. Obviously, you don't want to get blown out, but if you can keep it close, there's not much of loss potential. But if you make it to where you really, really compete in this one, if you were able to come out on top, you have recruiting benefits, which Louisville has shown that they've been extremely solid in the 2023 cycle. The momentum that it would add for the team on the field, moving into 2 solid ranked teams against NC State and Kentucky. And then we're talking about possibly, when it comes to Scott Satterfield's job moving forward, there would be no hot seat, and there might not necessarily be one right now. Now, granted, there still is, I think, some more work that needs to be done before Satterfield is truly in the clear. But it would be huge for this program. Obviously, I think you would then probably start the talk for maybe an extension. That might be a little bit premature, but still that would be huge moving forward. So a lot on the table here. We'll talk more about that on the Friday afternoon episode of the show. But for the remainder of the show, we're going to talk about the players to watch for the basketball team in the opening game against the Bellarmine Knights. So we'll do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends over at Built Bar. Can we pause the podcast for a second? Okay, we're paused. Great. Look, you've got to try this. I'm talking about Built Bar's new reimagined flavors. I'm talking about cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, and coconut brownie topper, white chocolate peppermint granola. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And then you have obviously the candy cane brownie puff. Built puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. All of Built's products are 100% covered in chocolate, but they have all of the healthy benefits of a protein bar. So you get the best of both worlds. There will be a time before you tried these new Built flavors, but after that, it's going to be magical afterwards. So you got to try it. Get 15% off your order right now by using the promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. Once again, that's using the promo code LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at built.com. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11 Plus, 5 days a week, your team every day. For the final segment of this Wednesday edition of the show, we're talking about key players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals against the Bellarmine Knights. There are two of them to focus on. Number one, I think Jae'Lyn Withers is the player to watch, the number one player to watch, in my opinion, because of how he has looked in the preseason. There hasn't been many positives to take away from the exhibition matches for the Cardinals, except the fact that Jae'Lyn Withers looks more like his freshman year self than he did himself last year, which is a huge sign for Louisville. Looks confident shooting the ball from deep, solid attacking the boards, and also just looks to be more confident with getting the basketball down in the paint. It seems like it seems like the speed of the game has kind of slowed down to where he's kind of internalized the speed on the court and been able to instead of playing to the speed of the game, kind of playing at his own pace and making defenses react. I think that he's a mismatch with his with his skill set. I think that being 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", whatever he is, with the ability to stretch the floor, the strength to be effective inside, but also a solid rebounder as well, and a perimeter shooter. I think that with a more defined role, I mean, could be a huge, the sky is the limit type ceiling, or type season, I should say, for Jae'Lyn Withers. So I think that he's going to be the player to watch for here against Bellarmine, because he is obviously the hot hand through the first two exhibition matches. I would like to see him continue these strong performances, because the points are going to need to come from somewhere. And as the other players, some of the younger guys are trying to find their footing and, carve out their roles, I would like to see that consistency and see Jae'Lyn Withers step up and be that leader that a lot of people thought he was going to be last year, that just kind of didn't necessarily come into fruition. So I would like to see Withers be an effective rebounder tonight, but I would also like to see him score in double digits and take good shots from behind the arc, but also utilize the mismatches size wise down low, because there is going to be a little bit of a size mismatch for the Louisville Cardinals. So Jae'Lyn Withers, number one. Number two is Ellis. I think that with Mike James, Kamari Lands, Fabio Basili not having played one regular season Division I college basketball contest, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Ellis to have a solid performance in a couple of different ways. Number one, I think, is his instincts as a point guard, his instincts as a passer are going to need to be on full display on Wednesday evening. He's going to have to put that court vision on full display and really be the cohesive link for the offense, whether that is utilizing the pick and roll and being the ball handler off the screen, finding his teammates open on the perimeter and just utilizing the mismatches, getting downhill, using his athleticism, getting to the rim. I'm not saying he has to score 20 points, but I would like to see him, lead the offense and be the point guard that I know that a lot of people know that he can be. And also I think that he has to stay out of foul trouble. That's going to be that's going to be something to focus on all year long, but especially in the first part of the season where some of the younger guys that are trying to find their footing, find their roles, like Basili, like James, like Lands, Devin Ree, so on and so forth, it's going to take, Ellis being composed on both ends of the court to where he doesn't rack up early fouls and have to spend an extended amount of time on the bench, because that's one drawback to not bringing in, a already proven Division I guard or even a highly rated point guard, is the fact that some of these younger guys are going to have to develop into that position. Not saying that it cannot be filled, but Ellis is going to have to really really zone in and limit the fouls, but also be a huge facilitator on the offensive end, which I know he can be. So Jae'Lyn Withers, Ellis, the players to watch for on offense. Going to be a tough game. Solid but dangerous matchup for the Cardinals that they should win and they can win, but they're going to need to handle business. A lot to gain, but not a lot to lose in the upcoming football matchup against Clemson. Like I said, I'll be on a work trip until Friday afternoon, so there won't be an episode until Friday afternoon, but I'll finish previewing the Clemson matchup. We'll also talk about the result from tonight against the Bellarmine Knights. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But that is going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here on Friday.